Born from the real-world needs of Resolve Marine, the Resolve Maritime Academy offers unmatched training for maritime or marine, firefighting, safety, and resource management. Our courses are taught by active professionals, providing hands-on experience that goes beyond industry standards. Whether you need STCW, USCG, or MCA certification, Resolve Academy will prepare you to mitigate emergencies, saving property and lives. Training as real as it gets, with real-world scenarios and live-action simulations. Push your limits, bring out your inner hero, and become an indispensable member of your team. Resolve Maritime Academy, where real-world training meets real-life expertise.
Hello, this is Rick Thomas, host of Yachting USA, brought to you by Yachting International Radio, and I'm with my good friend and associate, Laura Sherrod today of Newcoast. Laura, thanks for joining the podcast. Thanks for being part of this today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. So you have had some of the most interesting people in your podcast. I'm honored to be here.
I was just going to say it continues.
Oh, very nice. Thanks.
No, it's. I think it's one of the privileges I enjoy and being able to reach out to some really key people in the industry. And by and large, they all say, yeah, let's do this. So, it's good. We get a lot of people on the record and we get a really good deep dive into what the yachting industry has been doing and what it's all about and where it's going. And one thing I've learned over the last several years is this industry does not exist without insurance.
That's true.
Like it or not, you're the good guy, the bad guy, it depends on the situation and the circumstance, but you've got to have the underwriters involved in this industry if it's going to be successful, if it's going to continue. So
it's kind of like death and taxes and insurance, right? Yeah.
You know what?
Yeah.
These things are given, right?
Like it or not.
Oh, like it or not. But what's more fun is that this is an industry of people and relationships and history and heritage and all of that. And as I've gotten to know you over the last few years, one of the realizations that I didn't have initially was you and your family go so far back, multi-generational.
Yeah, it's very true. And we, my mother's side, she was Merrill. And so Merrill Stevens Shipyard.
Right.
Grew up in the boatyard myself, as my dad ran the Coconut Grove facility. And my grandfather, came down here from Jacksonville and started it down here.
Crazy.
So.
I mean, and that's one of the things I like talking about is these legacy businesses. And Merrill Stevens is absolutely a legacy business. It's 130 years old?
It's 135, I think.
Okay. It's a lot older than probably any other shipyard that would like to lay claim to that, unless you're maybe up in the Northeast area someplace. But for Florida, that's remarkable. And I want to show people. Tristan, my son, is here helping me produce, and there's a photograph that Laura brought. Can you bring that over to me real quick? And I just think this is so crazy cool.
So this is a picture of the Miami waterfront in 1924. So 100 years ago, this was what shipping looked like. There was no such thing as containers.
Right.
This is, all these tall ships were actually how cargo was delivered to all the Caribbean and how cargo got to South Florida. And here's these wonderful guys doing their jobs, replacing spars, and sailing existed.
Right.
So this is, I think, right where the Miami Heat Arena, where this is a picture of.
And this is dated Miami 1924.
Yeah.
Crazy to think about. 100 years ago this year, this is what was happening down in Miami at the waterfront.
Can you believe that?
Yeah. It's great. I love it.
Yeah.
So you look at this and you understand where our industry has come from. And this is certainly the segue between commercial maritime and then eventually segued into yachting.
Yeah.
And that's important because one has a lot to do with the other. The owners of those clipper ships that were transporting goods across the ocean ended up being some of the first yacht owners that were also finding a lifestyle on the water with their families, enjoying the wealth that they created through shipping. And so here we are. I mean, it's kind of cool to see that piece of the history.
Yeah.
Tell us a little more. I mean, I've been in Florida most of my life, but Miami and that part of Florida has been kind of the 305.
Yes.
But what's your experience down there?
Miami was such a great boating, and still is a great boating and yachting area. Biscayne Bay, my heart and soul. But I grew up boating in Biscayne Bay, and I had a kind of an interesting mom and dad who would do quirky things, and so my dad running the Coconut Grove facility, they would buy and sell boats, and so I wanted to tell you a funny story about them just to kind of give you a history, because
please.
We had some very strange boats that we owned over the years, and one of those was the Cosa Grande. So I don't usually tell this story because it's too crazy for people to actually believe.
Not too crazy here.
So my father and his best friend, Fred Kirtland, decided to buy a boat from the University of Miami. It was received from them, donated, and so they bought it. It was a 110-foot Fairmile. It was originally used in the war for mining. It was double diagonal planked.
Okay.
Wood
hull. Right. Cold mold, essentially.
Yeah, cold mold. And so they transformed it into a yacht. My dad and his friend Fred Kirtland bought it, and they could not afford this. Okay.
It's a boat.
It's a boat. So they bought it.
I get that.
Literally in the 60s, they bought this boat, and so they needed a captain. And they got a very good qualified captain, Captain Tom. He was also an engineer. He was a captain in the Navy, but he was a paraplegic. He couldn't use his legs. So he had braces on his legs. And so we had Captain Tom, and then they also needed a first mate because they needed a charter because they could not afford this boat.
You're about to tell me this guy's blind, right?
Yes. Kenny, the first mate, was legally blind. So he had these Coke bottle glasses, and they ran this thing on charter. That ran the heck out of it on charter in order to pay for it because they could not afford it.
When you say ran the heck out of it?
Under market. They did the Republican National Convention in 1968.
Wow.
They took it up they had a charter where they went to the space shot, and their charter guest was Howard Hughes. And so they wanted to meet Howard Hughes, and so Fred and Lester and two of their friends dressed up as crew, and they were crew on board this charter at Clawton Island, which is in Miami.
These were able-bodied crew now.
These were old men who did not know how to be crew, and they were crew on board. And it turned out that they had the vice president aboard, but they didn't want to see the vice president. They wanted to see Howard Hughes. And so Howard Hughes stayed in the guest stateroom the whole time, but they did get to see the space shot.
They saw the space shot, but not so much of Howard Hughes.
Not so much of Howard Hughes.
He's had a reputation to be a very reclusive man.
Yes.
Wow.
Indeed.
Wow. So, that's a great story.
Yeah.
That's a great story. So you had a charter boat with a captain that moved around in braces so he could walk, and a first mate that was legally blind.
Yes.
And you did a lot of...
Chartered the heck out of it. Yeah, they would go.
I read somewhere there were like 40 weeks of charter a year, something like that. Anybody that's in charter today listening to this is going, way, 40 weeks.
They had to pay for it.
Yeah, there you go. That's one way to monetize the asset, isn't it? Which is something we get into in some of our other conversations, and who knows, in this conversation with underwriting and insurance and all that, could touch on some of that. But no, that's a great story.
Thank you. And so the key, I think, is that yachting is fun. Yachting to be fun.
Yeah.
It's gotten very stuffy, I guess you'd say. Corporate.
Business.
Maybe because there's so much money involved, but the fun needs to be there.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
And that's been kind of the conversation that we've enjoyed on this show. And there's some nostalgia, of course, to this. And when I got into the business in the early 80s, it was very much still a cottage industry, I think.
Yeah.
Certainly I tell people I didn't know what I didn't know back then, that's for sure. It was fun. Still is. I have a good time. Everybody that knows me knows I'm enjoying this. And most of the people I associate with are in it because they love it. There's a passion for it. There's just this depth of relationships, I think, that exists that allow us to stay connected. And even when it gets corporate and heavy and sometimes feels like it's too structured, it's still a great industry to do business in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I totally agree. Yeah.
And I don't think I respected the insurance space sufficiently until I started in a yacht management company. When I ran JMS and we're building a fleet here in the States, it became apparent real quick how important insurance underwriting and relationships with insurance underwriters and agents and businesses really are to your success. There's only so many ways you can skin the cat, and you've got to look at these assets and understand what it takes to get them underwritten, and that's sometimes easier said than done. But I want to have some fun in this too, in that you, because of your role in this industry and you've seen what's happened, the growth of it, you've been around some of the scoundrels and some of the stories and some of the things that have happened. And we were talking earlier, and I remember a lot of people listening or watching this podcast will harken back to The Wolf of Wall Street. Leonardo did a great job in his role there, I think. And a friend of mine in the industry, was the captain of that boat.
Yes, Mark.
Mark Elliott is quite a guy. Hopefully I'll have him on board here one of these episodes. We'll do some deep dives into some of our mutual history in this industry. But there was a boat built originally by Coco Chanel.
Right.
And Merrill Stevens figures into this, but I'd love to hear you tell the story, because it's a great story.
Yeah. So Coco Chanel built a boat that was purchased by a guy named Mel Powers. Mel Powers was from Texas, and Mel brought it to Merrill Stevens and decided it wasn't big enough, as they do in Texas. And so they designed the plans, they cut it in half, and they literally put 20 feet in the middle of the boat, which you wouldn't do today, right? But I guess you do. Yeah. So anyway, they did. And she was kind of a narrow beam, but she...
Kinda?
Yeah. Yeah. And so they successfully, beautifully did this job. Unfortunately, Mel Powers ran out of money about 3/4 of the way through the job. And so now Merrill Stevens owns it and the bank owns it, and they need to get it sold.
We were just talking, boats get expensive.
Especially when nobody's paying the bill.
Yeah, right.
So they said, we've got to finish the interior. And my mother was a designer, and she came on board and she goes, oh, this was Coco Chanel. So she helped design the interior so that it would be in line with what Coco Chanel originally had done. However, the Texas bankers had different ideas, and they decided to put in some shag carpeting and some mirrors and things like that. Well,
Coco would be rolling in her grave, wouldn't she?
So along comes the lovely and wonderful Bernie Little, and he buys the boat, and he corrects the the travesty that was done by the Texans, and he makes it beautiful interior, big eagle, big eagle. Yes. Yeah. And then charters with Mark Elliott as the captain to Jordan Belfort.
Wolf of Wall Street.
Buys the boat because he's having so much fun chartering it. He buys the boat, and he ends up naming it Nadine. And Nadine, unfortunately, you know the rest.
Yeah, she was in the Mediterranean. And, for those who don't really understand weather, we think about our weather here with the hurricanes that come in. But the Mistrals they have in the Mediterranean, where you get that cold air coming down off the Alps and all that hot air coming out of the Sahara Desert in Africa. And there's this little sea that kind of divides the two. And boy, he got into like 60-foot seas, something like that. Insane.
Right.
Insane.
Like that.
Yeah. One moment it's looking pretty good. Next moment you got a wave coming through the boat, and things start getting pear-shaped real quick.
I had understood they knew some weather was coming, but certainly not to that level.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you really knew it was going to be that level, no matter how badly you want to make that golf game, you're going to maybe make a different plan. But so that was a loss. Did insurance pay on that loss?
That was a big one, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We wrote that check. At the same year, we wrote the check for Miss Turnberry.
Oh, part of the Denison fleet.
Yes.
I'll avoid that. Yeah.
Flat water, bright sun. There she goes.
Down she goes. Yeah.
So that was a rough year. That was a rough year.
That would be, and that's part of the challenge underwriting these assets is that they move, they're on the ocean. The ocean's unpredictable, and they're built by people. and almost always they're hand built by people. They're not coming off production lines by and large, not production lines that people think of with automobiles or iPhones or things like that. So you have the human factor involved all the time, and then you have age and corrosion and questionable maintenance and questionable crew and owners, and that's a tough world to successfully mitigate your risks.
Yeah,
I would think so.
I actually asked a captain, I said, which would you rather have? Would you rather have a better boat with bad maintenance, or a boat that's been well maintained that's not quite as good of a boat?
I bet you I know what he told you.
Well, you tell me what you think.
I'm going to guess that captain, if he's worth his salt, is going to say, I'll take the mediocre boat that's well maintained.
You're right.
Absolutely.
You're right.
Yeah, because I don't care how well you build a boat, if it's not well maintained, it's no longer a good boat. Yeah. That's exactly right. So I was actually a little surprised at first, but then I started thinking about it. And I'm like, yeah, actually, you can take a good boat and make it bad. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I've seen a few of those.
Yeah.
And that's, down here in South Florida, that's, I think, one of the challenges that is faced by almost everybody. We were talking earlier about going up the New River, and I'm sure you can go up the Miami River, and there's a lot of places you can go, and you see a whole fleet of these white boats tied to the dock. And some of them are great, and they're operating. You see them out on the ocean occasionally, and some of them you go by day after day, week after week, month after month, they've never moved.
Yeah.
And you see the reef that's growing on the hull, and you think to yourself, wow, and you can't really insure those boats. I couldn't imagine.
No, insurers, they went through their learning curves, and there's companies that come into the marketplace and they'll give it a try, and then they'll get burned on it. But the insurers that are in our South Florida marketplace right now are pretty sophisticated, and they know if a boat's been sitting around for a period of time, it's a problem.
Yeah. Right.
Without maintenance, it's a death knell for down here.
Right. Absolutely. You hear about sinking at the dock, issues like that. Boats are supposed to have captains on them, and they're captain by name only, and the captain shows up once or twice a week, and it's just, there's a reason for that. If you've got an asset that's sitting on the water, particularly if it's not being actively used and actively maintained, someone needs to be on board to hear that high water alarm, or to deal with the fire alarms when they go off, or whatever that may be that's bringing that boat to risk. And then we're sitting at LMC right now, and we're looking around at a shipyard full of boats, and I don't think it's not occurred to anybody. Is that the right way to say it? It's not occurred? It's probably occurred to everybody. That's the way to put it.
The positive.
That, if any one of these boats all of a sudden were to catch on fire, wow, what that ramification could look like. Because this close proximity of all of this, and so many of them are fiberglass built boats and all that. So you really want that captain, that crew on board full time. You want people paying attention to what's happening, and not just let things go fallow or derelict or whatever that looks like.
Absolutely. So, it's 100 degrees outside right now with 100% humidity. So you want to keep the air conditioner going.
Yeah.
But you don't have the crew on board. And you actually have systems that are active on a yacht all the time. And so, a lot of policies actually warrant that there's a full-time live aboard crew.
That's right.
And, I would say for good reason.
Right. If you don't have that air conditioning running, then you've got another set of problems here in South Florida.
Exactly.
That interior goes bad so quick, the mold and mildew that collects, and that's unhealthy. It quickly diminishes the value of the vessel, and it's tens and tens of thousands of dollars of remediation or more.
Right.
So, you can't just turn it off. You can't shut down a boat and walk away from it and expect it to maintain value and integrity.
And I think that's the learning curve that new owners face.
Yeah.
Is, they do not understand the long-term, what they've just signed up for. Because maybe the broker might be telling them, oh, you're going to make money on charter, and you're going to do, 18 weeks a year, and you're going to do, and it's going to be fine, and then they realize what's involved in the maintenance of a boat, whether it's a brand new boat or if it's 10 years old or whatever, I do think the learning curve is very steep for new owners.
It is. We touched on this before too, and since our conversation, I was thinking about another client I was working with. He had a number of boats. He had a couple 35-foot center consoles. I think he had a Hatteras 50 or 52. And then he went out and he purchased a 92-foot, I don't know if it was a Nordhaven or it doesn't really matter. It was a much bigger boat, much by volume and displacement and everything. And he was flabbergasted to find out that he couldn't get his boat insured unless he hired a captain. And the way we ultimately worked it out is he did hire a captain. The captain signed on for a year. And this underwriter, and assume there's probably some commonality here, this underwriter said, if you keep the captain for a year and that captain is with you while you're operating the boat, at the end of that year, if the captain feels that you are competent to operate your boat, he can write a letter of a testament or recommendation, whatever, and then the underwriters will look at that and consider the experience of you're operating your own boat, and you may be able to get it insured as your own.
Yeah, the difficulty is they're probably still going to want professional crew when he's running it.
Yeah. When you get that big,
Yeah. And you need another person aboard, right?
Yeah.
So, the days of when I first started work as an insurance agent, there were what we called the dreamers. And, maybe husband and wife, we just bought this boat. We're going to go down and we're going to go to the Caribbean. Then we're going to go transatlantic and we're going to go.
Yeah.
And, they bought a 60-foot sailboat or something like that. And they make it basically to Fort Lauderdale, and then they divorce. And, and
the reality.
Yeah. But
you mentioned 60-foot sailboat, and there's a story you had referenced earlier before we sat down here together. And I actually had some experience with a friend of mine delivering 63-foot Irwins from the factory in St. Petersburg down to St. Thomas and St. Martin. And
good boat.
they're great boats, beautiful catch rig boats. We would leave St. Pete and provision in Key West, come around Florida, go out through a hole in the wall, go about 500-600 miles out in the Atlantic, and make a right-hand turn, broad reach all the way down to St. Thomas where we'd come in. 10 days at sea, gorgeous, just great memories, well-built boat, good boat. But then you mentioned a boat called Night Sound.
Night Sound, yeah.
Night Sound, yes,
Yeah.
Night Sound, not Night Sound.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us about Night Sound, because it's a great story.
I believe she was an Irwin.
She was.
She was a 63 Irwin.
Same boat I was delivering.
Oh,
I know the
gosh.
boat real well. Even had a little jacuzzi behind the aft mast.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So our client, and I won't mention his name, but he and his family and some friends were taking the boat offshore, and they got into some weather and they got seasick, and they decided that somebody broke their arm, and it was heavy weather. Okay. Mind you, it was heavy weather. And they called the Coast Guard and they said, get us out of here. And the Coast Guard did. They came and they plucked them off the boat off of North Carolina. And
they charge for that kind of service, don't they?
They didn't charge us, put it that way.
Okay.
But we did get charged later. Yeah. So we paid the total loss. And
so they abandoned the ship. And
they abandoned the vessel and
said
it was sinking.
Okay.
And good old Night Sound didn't want to sink. So Night Sound sailed across the Atlantic, and we got a call from a captain of a Lykes container ship and said, I have your vessel in tow. And with the ship.
So she transatlantic?
Without a crew.
Wow.
And so...
And if I get the story right, she was found off the coast of Africa.
Yes, coast of Africa. That is correct. I can't believe you know this. This is absolutely true. So we got the call from the captain of the Lykes container ship, and we ended up getting some money back for underwriters. Which was like $10,000 or something.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, and he got the boat.
Well, it's salvage rights.
It was a good
salvage
boat.
Rights.
Yeah, she was a good old boat.
That's a great story. That's I guess that's the fun side of being in that world you exist in. Is you hear these stories, you see it firsthand. You're having to make hard decisions or have hard conversations. Maybe is a better way to put it. Yeah. And we hate it when a claim is not paid.
And so part of my angst and some of the stuff I've been telling owners about lately is, do be very diligent about this. And we were talking about this earlier at lunch. When I started, it was pretty normal for an insurer to not have a problem if the owner did something or another that was unrelated to a material fact of the vessel. Mm-hmm. We'll go aground. Doesn't really matter if your fire extinguisher was not certified. But that's not the case anymore. Insurers and not all insurers are this way, but a lot of insurers are very specific about their requirements. And if you're not meeting them, they may not pay your claim.
Wow. Cautionary tale to everybody. Pay attention to this, because that would be a horrible reason to find out that your asset all of a sudden, was, lost and without any, remediation. That would be a bad day.
That's a bad day. That's a bad day for everybody.
Yeah.
Having a claim is a bad day.
Of course.
And then not having any coverage is a
really bad day.
Yeah.
Really bad day. Towable tenders.
Oh, God.
I've been involved in that from quite a few different perspectives, both in yacht management and in my world of tender handling when I was manufacturing cranes and specialized tender handling equipment. When everything's good, it's good. But we know when we go to sea, everything's not always good.
Right.
So, is there a, I don't want to use the word policy, that's overused in a conversation like this, but is there a perspective about towing tenders and the do's and don'ts and what people should be thinking about if they're really serious about wanting to?
How much time do we have? No,
we're down to it. This is a Joe Rogan. We got 3 hours left to go. No.
So the towed tender thing is such a big issue because we have so many boats that are now wanting to tow tenders. It's like every charter boat has to have a big tow behind.
Yeah.
Every yacht wants a big tow behind.
You should call them chase boats.
Yeah, chase boat would be okay, actually. But a full-on tow behind tender where, they go, is it still there? Yeah, it's still there. It's still there. Yeah. That has proved to be a big problem. And, I was just negotiating with a captain the other day just to go off on it. They had just lost a tender and he was renting another tender, which didn't have coverage. And they wanted us to provide the coverage. And I said, well, it's too big. You're going to have to use it as a chase boat. And he says, well, I don't want to put a crewman in there because it's 20 knots. And I'm like, well, then why are you towing it? Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
So it's a real issue, and there are solutions.
There's businesses that have come into play that have equipment and sensors and things that you can incorporate.
Really smart things.
Yes.
I'm like a Baptist preacher on this subject.
Here's your pulpit. Go, Laura.
Tow Pro, baby.
Yes. Tow Pro is a good
I don't know. There's others out there. You would know better.
They're really the ones that I'm aware of that have kind of set the bar and done the initial R&D and, have come up with some products that, let you know that the batteries are good, that the bilge pumps are on or off, that, you got your
the
lights
tensioner on
the tow and bridle. Yep. If you all of a sudden lose that, you get alarms going off saying, hey, your asset's about 2 nautical miles behind you now and increasing, better come get it.
Absolutely. So, our response is don't tow anything over 35% of the total length of the yacht is a no-go.
You look at length or displacement?
Length.
Okay.
Length overall.
Right.
So if it's a 100-footer, it's easy, right? 35 feet max that we can get insured. Second thing is you're going to have a big deductible.
50%, right?
Potentially 50. Some are 25, but 50's a good guess. So you've got skin in the game. As an owner, if you've got a $400,000 tender, that's $200,000 you just lost. And the third thing is if you don't follow all the guidelines of what they say, it has to have a light on it. It has to have a tracking system. It has to have this. It has to have that. If you don't follow that, there's not coverage while you're towing.
Right.
So all of that is is important because we know everybody wants to do this. And it's a big part of yachting to have this wonderful, chase boat or go fast behind the big boat. Mm-hmm. But we got to do it right.
That's right.
Yeah.
No, that's good. That's a good message.
The other thing is, and we'll just add one more thing.
Sure.
Once that claim happens, it doesn't just affect the owner. It goes on the captain's record.
Ouch.
Yes.
Yeah, so when you make your captain's claim of no losses, that all of a sudden gets blemished.
Right.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, the captain just lost the tender.
Puts him in a bad them
yeah.
in a bad place. You've got a captain that understands the risks and probably by and large, given the choice, wouldn't tow a tender. And you've got an owner that's basically saying, you're under my employ and I really want to do this. I really want to do this. So we really want to do this, right? And what do you do?
Right.
Resign, or you just say, okay, we'll do it the best we can and hopefully best practices prevail.
I think that's the operating procedure that most captains go by, but I don't know if that's the best solution. I mean, I would say disclose.
Right.
Tell the owner, these are the problems. This is what could potentially happen.
Mm-hmm. Right. And just understand what that risk-reward paradigm really looks like.
Right. Right.
Interesting. The other one, which is anybody listening to this podcast is going, when's it start talking about the fires? Because I think of all the challenges that we as an industry face right now, and this is real, because if you can't get these boats underwritten, you don't have an industry.
Right.
It's true. You just, it has to be dealt with at some level, and whether we talk about like the Lursen fires that have happened and the drilling down into how that kind of fire can start and not be contained and result in the losses that were lost, throwing nobody under the bus. It's just a general conversation about shipyard protocols and what it looks like to maintain safety, during the build process or refit process. Because it's not just Lursen. They're big boats and they're a big name and
right.
reputation. So that's an easy one to point to. I mean, they happen a lot. Maybe not a lot, but enough. Too much. Right. Because it becomes catastrophic. And, just thank goodness nobody seriously injured or no fatalities in that particular type of incident. But onboard fires, my goodness, and you can't say the same about the onboard fires. There was that horrible in California a few years ago.
The Conception.
That 32 fatalities, just horrible. That was a lithium-ion battery start fires believed. And
they haven't figured out exactly how the fire occurred, but because I actually sat through a seminar on it, and that was the original, was that they had told everyone, give us your cell phone and we're going to charge it all together. So there were like 14 cell phones all being charged in one outlet. And so that was one of the theories.
Well, as a guy that has been on many live-aboard dive charters, because that's one of my passions in the world, and everybody that knows Rick knows that I'm an avid diver and I dive around the world, and I've been on these types of boats. You have the cell phones. I would say the chance that the cell phones causing that fire about nil. You have, when divers are congregating together, there are piles of underwater cameras, underwater DPV scooters, all of your dive computers and all of the stuff that's used in your diving operations tend to end up on a table someplace up on deck where you plug in and you're charging overnight because you got early morning dives planned. Of course that boat was a problem too. There was no good egress out of the crew accommodations, and so when you look at boat design and naval architecture and hazards that way.
Industry changing event, that particular fire, and tragic. What's happening as far as fires on private pleasure vessels right now is this really serious concern about lithium-ion batteries.
Legit.
And so it's been thought of as a big boat problem. It's been thought that, okay, it's big yachts that are having these issues. And so therefore, the clauses that they're talking about putting into policies really have to do with big boats and crew and how you manage this and how you manage that. Well, there was just one on a 70-foot 2 days ago. Not a big boat, not crew on board, but it was a lithium-ion battery issue. So I believe, coming up, it's going to be something we're going to see on medium-sized yachts, like the middle market yachts, as well, is these concerns about how are you managing your charging, like you talked about, how are you managing your, storing of these. As I said, it's 100 degrees here. They say you're not supposed to store those things in more than 45 degrees Celsius. So what are you doing when you're storing these things in a 120, degree stored yacht?
It's a dilemma. It's, when, we were running our boats through our yacht management company, we did come up with written policies about how you charge these batteries. Location on deck, do it during daylight hours only, always have a watch on hand. So while they're being charged, there's crew, overwatch on the charging. You can take it deeper because it's a lot of conversations I've had with some people about this subject, talk about the battery chargers that are being used. You can buy the cheaper ones on Amazon that charge twice as fast, but they're not necessarily compatible with the battery.
Yeah.
So as soon as you've got this thermal runaway, you have a containment issue. If you have them up on deck, you have a fighting chance maybe to get them thrown overboard. Not that I'm advocating, polluting our seas, but it's probably way more pollution if the boat catches on fire.
Yeah, exactly.
So pick your poison and toss them in. Or, I've heard people talk about only charging on land. Well, that's great if you're a smaller boat, like the one I run. We were out yesterday diving, and we've got 2 DPVs that Tristan and I use, and they're both powered by large lithium-ion batteries. But those are charged at the house, and they come to the boat, built into the propulsion vehicle, and when we're done, they're taken off the boat and charged at the house, and you mitigate it that way. And the smaller yachts can do some of that stuff too, but if they're crewed and the boats are moving around, then you are charging on board the boat. And then you better have a good policy and procedure in place for doing so.
Right, absolutely.
Or consider what you actually allow on board your boat.
And that's really where the insurers are talking about. They're saying, we need to write some information about what we'll allow for you to keep on board your boat. And you need to give us more information about what you've got on board, because it's kind of, Pandora's box right now. There's no telling what's in there.
Yeah, no, you don't know.
Yeah.
And that's the other part of it is, sometimes crew and owners don't know what they don't know. They don't know what's there. And is it really a lithium-ion battery? Maybe it's another battery technology that's being used in that particular component device they've got. So, the battery technology is improving. I think this is a problem that will probably change in the years to come as the battery technology allows for safer types of batteries. But right now, we do have a problem with what's available.
Yeah, I agree. And so, you're right, because, it's kind of like some of the problems we've had with, say, electronics. It used to be, you'd spend $25,000 on a piece of electronics that nowadays you can replace for $500.
Right.
And so,
yeah.
So I think you're right. I think that will evolve. So
the other one, and I tell you what, I'd love to bring Eddie Dennison in this conversation sometime in the future. Electric Eddie. There's this move to all electric boats.
Yeah.
And the technology, as I understand it, and I don't claim to understand it well, is that these batteries used in these electric boats are not like the lithium-ion batteries that have that thermal runaway potential per se. But the other side of that coin is when one of these boats catch on fire, could be a lightning strike, could be any other, but boats were catching on fire long before lithium-ion batteries came into play. What happens to an electric boat when it's being consumed? What effect do these batteries then have into the grand scheme of things? And, is this something that should be a concern? Has it been addressed by naval architects and shipyards and underwriters and people involved in seeing these new boat technologies come out?
The answer is no, Probably, but I think it does have to do with the aging fleet that we were talking about earlier. So there is a problem that we're all going to face is plastic boats don't go away. Mm-hmm. And so as they age, what do you do with them? How do you insure them? There's very limited markets. Get used to the fact that you're going to have actual cash value, which you know what that means, but I don't know if everybody knows what that means. Basically, if you bought something for $10 and it's 5 years old, you're only going to get $5, basically 50%, or so those percentages,
depreciation of that value over time.
Yeah, and which you can understand if it's your necktie, but you can't if it's your yacht. Right. And so those depreciable assets are going to factor into policies soon, I believe, and certain underwriters, just like, okay, this is the only way we're going to insure these old boats, is if we, again, put owners some skin in the game. Yeah. And
these boats that are uninsurable, what happens when one of these boats gets involved in a collision, a grounding? I can imagine there are some entities, some individual owners that would just walk away going, well, I can't afford it. I don't, it's not insured. And, if two boats are colliding and one is uninsured and the other one's fully insured.
We do have some clauses in policies like uninsured boater coverage, but so just uninsured boater is kind of a transition from uninsured motorist, which is not physical damage. It's only liability, and it's only for what happens to your bodily injury. So your boat's, if you're hit by somebody and they're not insured, you're covered under your policy. But if they have caused you injury, then that's where the uninsured boater comes in.
Okay, gotcha. So as we come to the end of our conversation, a couple of things come to mind real quick. One is, how does Newcoast get involved with risk avoidance, risk mitigation, working with your clients and basically preventing these claims? What does that look like?
Well, first, let me tell you who Newcoast is.
Yes, why don't you tell me who Newcoast is? Because that's one of the reasons why we're here, is to explore Newcoast a little bit in your role in the company, because it's, I think, from my experience and understanding, one of the top tier companies in the industry. And I think you ought to give us all a little bit your 5-minute elevator pitch.
I will. Okay. So Newcoast started as a finance organization. They do boat loans or yacht loans.
Okay.
They were in business 20 years. We started with them just 4 years ago doing insurance. And so our role has been to develop an insurance facility, and we've grown from a team of 2 to 32 in those 4 years. And so we have a boat team, which is very transactional. I could never do that, but they write like 350 boats a month.
Wow.
But they're all like, Harris pontoon boats and Bass Boston whalers and stuff like that. So, and they're around the United States. Our yacht team is more international. We have an office in France. We have Fort Lauderdale, Birmingham, Alabama, the yachting capital of the world. We have Iowa and Iowa, yeah.
Iowa.
Yeah.
How many yachts do you have in Iowa?
And 2 in California.
Okay.
So we have 9 hours in between our teams, but we are very seasoned, not old, seasoned yacht people. And so we know a lot about the boating industry. We know the carriers. We know, when somebody calls us, they know less about what they need than we do.
Right.
So we try and help them develop a proper plan for their insurance. Gotcha. So that's my goal, is always to make it painless, make it a good experience as far as finding the insurance, but also make sure that they understand they may have a great agent already. I mean, there's a few of them out there that are really good.
Right.
And, it's a relationship business. So we like to help our clients find good solutions for their insurance. So, and even if it's not with us.
Okay, bravo. And you are part of the MarineMax family.
We are. So we are the one and only portion of MarineMax that does insurance. So we do for all of the familia, which is Fraser, Northrop, Fairport, N&J, which we happen to be in their office right now.
Intrepid.
Intrepid, yes.
I had a great conversation with Ken.
Oh, yes.
Not too long ago.
Intrepid is a fabulous boat.
They build an amazing boat. They really do. And the Intrepid story is so cool. If you guys go back in my episodes and see that conversation Ken and I had a few weeks ago, you'll come away learning a little bit about that boat builder too. Good operation.
Yes, yeah. But we try, as you know, being a part of International Super Yacht Society, we try and stay connected in the industry through ISS.
Yep.
Through U.S. Super Yacht Association, USSA, IYBA. We were just there. So we try and stay connected in the business and listen as much as talk.
That's the other, you've got 2 ears, 2 eyes, 1 mouth, And people come to me. I mentor young people through Young Professionals in Yachting.
Yes.
Great organization. And of course, people come to me all the time because I've been in the game a long time. They're like, Rick, how do you get successful in this business? And I tell them, you show up. And so you mentioned ISS. I'm a board member of the ISS, and it's a great organization to be a part of. USSA, also wonderful organization. I'm not, and I've never been, and I probably never will be a yacht broker on the record, but I have been a longtime member of IYBA because of the participation and the people that are part of that esteemed organization.
Yeah.
So here in South Florida, you got Marine Industries of South Florida.
Absolutely,
Phenomenal
great
organization. Group. And Phil Purcell at the helm of that organization, I think, has really done wonderful things. So this is how you basically scale in this business, being plugged in and showing up and participating.
Yeah, and there's one more group I do have to give a shout out to, which is the Fort Lauderdale Mariners Club.
I'm part of that too. Absolutely.
Yes,
we did the other night.
That's right.
Actually.
So they're
group.
specialized in the association of marine insurance related organizations. So this is a group that I've been deeply involved in for years.
So as to wrap up, quick vision of the future or a fun little story you haven't told us yet. Let's leave us with a smile and some optimism. What do you see going with this industry? What have you experienced?
Well, I do think we're looking at a nice, wonderful, healthy group of young people that are coming into the business.
Bravo. I absolutely agree with that.
And I do think that there is so much opportunity in our business for, male, female, doesn't matter. It's just, if you want to be a part of the yachting industry, it's right for people who are willing and happy and enthusiastic about it. So I don't have any stories other than I would probably say yachting is fun. It's still fun.
Yeah.
So
it is.
I'd say just keep it coming,
Absolutely. It's funny you say that. Two guys come to mind. I've got Ted McCumber, who basically, he's got his own brand, Ted Ship, and he epitomizes fun in yachting. And then Bobby Genovese, an owner and a friend who has been on my show now twice. His punchline is, "Who has more fun than us?" And he epitomizes, yacht ownership and being in the joyful side of the equation. So I think that's the takeaway. We'll wrap up with the idea that if you take care of your boat, your asset, you take care of your crew, you be realistic about the fact you're on the ocean and operating in a variety of conditions, sometimes wonderful, sometimes adverse, and you basically have good relationships with people like Laura here, you have the opportunity to have fun experience in yachting.
Even the bad stuff is good. I mean, because I don't remember a lot of the days I went boating.
Right.
But I remember everyone when I got into trouble. And, getting out of trouble can be as much fun as just having a day on the
Well, you
water.
learn a whole lot when you
do.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a young man on the other end of this conference table who can attest to that. He and I have taken our boat to sea in a number of experiences and conditions. I tell this story. We took a bunch of special boat operators out. They were getting technical dive training, and we ended up going out into 8 to 10 footers. And
diving.
Yeah, it was crazy. We, in retrospect, probably a better decision we made. But the fun part was, I had one of these bad boys just puking over the side of the boat. And at the time, my probably not quite 13-year-old son was hauling stage bottles and scooters around and, just making it happen out there. And came back to the dock from that going, boy, we sure learned a lot today now, didn't we? It's those days that, you kind of fine-tune things and get just a little bit better.
Yeah.
But Laura, this has been so much fun. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Wasn't that bad, was it?
It was great. Great. Thank you.
I got to thank you so much.
Yeah.
This is wonderful. This has been another episode of Yachting International Radio's Yachting USA. Rick Thomas here. And until the next time, I'm out of here.